Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSat Network. Friend, as you know, this week we have organized series of lecture on public administration, and the precise topic is governance, accountability, and transparency. In present day, the much talk about the governance. What does it mean? What is a good governance? And there are many other conceptual frameworks. And the world over has been effort to make the worldwide governance indicators. So we'll try to understand today the conceptual framework of governance, transparency, and accountability. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in studio Dr. Rajveer Sharma. He is a known academician, has long experience of teaching, 42 years, and he has been teaching public administration and political science in Delhi University, and has written books on governance, and has long experience of completing research on the topic socio-political aspects of governance awarded by different ministries of government of India, and been invited for the from various institutions, various universities in the country and also abroad, like Loyola University, Chicago, and many others. And Professor Sharma has also accredited to publish many articles in different national and international journals on governance, and has been writing for various topics related to the governance and the transparency and international on international and international journal. So I think his knowledge and experience working as a practical and as working as a researcher on the topic of governance, so has given a new niche, created a new niche in this area. So I think certainly will help us to understand this topic and will give insight into the topic of governance, accountability, and transparency. So I think his knowledge and experience will help us. So on your behalf, I welcome him for EduSat lecture on this very topic. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sinha. In the beginning, let me make certain very preliminary observations. One, that governance and accountability has always been a matter of concern for the people who were concerned with the development and delivery of public services to the people. But right since the ancient times till date, government, governance, and accountability has attracted the attention of the people all over. In fact, in terms of the location of power, in terms of the issue of representation, in terms of the modes of exercise of that power, and in terms of the accessibility of the people to those who were responsible for serving them, have always been the matters of concern. As we all know, that there have been debates amongst the political scientists and also the constitutional reformers, the administrative change seekers, with regard to the system of government, authoritarian and feudal system of government on the one side, and the the democratic participatory systems of the government on the other side. At the same time, we also know that these the debates have been the source of various movements also in the past, and particularly the revolutions for the rights of the people and the kind of change in the authority systems have always been in place. But over a period of time, in the modern times especially, the issues of governance, accountability, and transparency have acquired a new salience and have acquired a new importance. In fact, it has become very critical and crucial in the discourses at all levels, whether it is academic or it is the administrative political discourses or it is the development discourses. I think you will all agree that no kind of a discussion is thought to be complete without alluding to the issues of governance, accountability and transparency these days. Whether it is a speech, maybe even inaugural of a seminar or a conference, or it is the articles even in the popular press, maybe the newspapers or magazines or professional journals or research journals as such, we find that there are increasing focus on good governance, transparency and accountability. Having said that it has become very critical in the discourses, especially relating to development debates and development discourses, it becomes imperative for us to understand as to what exactly do we understand these days by these concepts and what is the need for the discussion on these issues. I think you again would like to agree with me that transparency, accountability and governance are very critical for the simple reason that it ensures it is a step, it is a mechanism, it is an instrument for an effective and credible working of a healthy democracy. It is the good governance, it is the transparent and the accountable working which determines the nature of a democracy, which determines the efficacy and efficiency of democracy, and how far democracy is really substantive rather than formal. And the issues of accountability, transparency and governance also are the instruments of fulfilling government's responsibility to the citizens and the taxpayers. You know, taxpayers and the citizens have a right to know how their money is being used, with what purposes, and to what extent that money has been utilized in an efficient, economical manner. And at the same time, these issues are also critical for all sectors to support a healthy economy that provides economic opportunities and benefits to the citizens. Now let me tell you that so far as the governance is concerned, I think this is a concept which has not seen any kind of a precise and all-time acceptable kind of a definition amongst all people. So you can say that the term governance has been more constitutive, sometimes it has been distributive, sometimes it has been seen on the basis of certain characteristics. But as the UNDP has sought to define good governance, particularly with reference to the crisis of governance, it has been said that good governance is the exercise of economic, political and administrative authority to manage the country's affairs at all levels. It comprises of the mechanisms, processes and institutions through which citizens and groups articulate their basic interests, exercise their legal rights, meet their obligations and mediate their differences. Now friends, if we read this kind of definition carefully, then it has certain very distinct kind of elements. One, it has been treated as a process, as a mechanism, and as institutions, meaning that governance includes three things. One, the process of exercising authority, taking decisions, and also delivering the goods and services to the citizens. So in that way, if you take it as a process, then it is something beyond the institutions. It is something beyond the institutions of the government, like the political executive, the legislature, the judiciary. It is something beyond them. And as a process of exercising authority, as a process of taking decisions, it also therefore extends to the involvement of the civil society, of the pressure groups. It includes the private sector, and it includes the media as well, meaning thereby that there are the institutions outside the government also, which form part of this process of exercise of the power to take decisions and deliver goods and services in a more responsive, responsible manner to the people. Another part which is very significant in this definition is that it has been treated as the exercise of different types of authority: economic, political, and administrative authority to manage country's affairs. But this definition also is not final and conclusive, as we will see that this has also been expanded from time to time. The point which I am trying to emphasize is that governance, the term governance, lacks in precision, and number two, the term governance is an evolving concept. Now, what do we really mean by this statement that governance is an evolving concept? Frankly, it is basically referring to the stages through which this concept of governance has evolved. I have right now quoted to you the definition given by the UNDP, but the term has also been defined by OECD, term has also been defined by International Monetary Fund, the term has also been defined by the World Bank, and therefore I say that the term governance is an evolving concept. Initially, the term governance embraced in early 1990s as an exercise of authority, as I said, to manage the resources for the secured economic development of the people. But as we proceeded from that 1990s, we find that in mid-90s, the term good governance was further expanded from merely the exercise of administrative, political, and economic authority to manage the economic resources of the country to include transparency, accountability, and participation as its characteristics, meaning thereby that governance was defined, or good governance was defined as the one which is transparent, which is accountable, which is participatory. In other words, this was the time when the focus worldwide was on not merely growth, but the focus was on the inclusive growth. The focus was on empowerment of the poor, eradication of poverty. The focus was on equity of opportunities, and also the focus was on some kind of a system which must take into account the aspirations of the deprived, those who did not have the adequate capabilities, capacities. They must be given those, they must be imparted with those capacities and capabilities. So therefore, in that context, the focus was shifting towards the expansion of the concept of good governance from merely the exercise of authority to the modes of exercise of authority, the ways. And in a way you can say, when you were emphasizing on transparency, accountability and participation, then it was focusing on partnerships. It was focusing on giving more voice to the poor, giving them a place in decision making, giving them a place in communicating their needs and desires. As we proceeded from the mid-90s, by 2000, Development Assistance Committee of the OECD saw good governance as a broad approach to partnership, and therefore it said that good governance is a system which is based on the joint efforts of the government as well as the non-government institutions, meaning the community-based organizations, the non-governmental organizations, the media, the civil society and the private sector. They were also taken along as a part and parcel of the system of governance, and therefore the corporate governance concept also came into much use. Corporate responsibility, corporate good governance also became a part of the discourses on development and administration. Then later, even the notion of predictability was also added to the list of transparency and accountability. Now, you might also be thinking that if we are talking of good governance, is there also something like bad governance? And again, I would say that there is nothing like precisely defined bad governance, but there are people who say that a system which is characterized by A, ignorance, can be taken as example of bad governance, or a system of governance which is giving rise to corruption or supporting corruption, or a corrupt governance is a bad governance. There are some other features which I would like to quote before you, which are taken as indicators of bad governance. Apart from ignorance and corruption, the other elements of bad governance are politicization of administration, weak democratic institutions, ineffective parliament, absence of the rule of law, absence of meritocracy, Now, if these elements are present in any system of governance, we may easily call that system as an example of bad governance. But let me make it very clear that these are merely the illustrative features. This is not an exhaustive list of the bad governance. There can be so many other indicators of bad governance, but if any system is characterized by indifference to the problems of people, carelessness on the part of the decision makers, or the abuse of authority by the decision makers and policy makers, or those who are responsible for the supply of goods and services to the people, well, we can say that this is fit enough to be called bad governance. So therefore, this leads us to expand further the characteristics of good governance. If that is the bad governance, then opposite to it naturally has to be established in order to call it good governance. So therefore, a good governance system is one which in fact characterized by a process which facilitates foresight, which is not merely reactionary in nature, which is proactive, which can visualize, which has a mission, which has a vision. So any system of government which functions on the basis of a vision and a mission, and thereby facilitates foresight and increases insight into several issues, can be called as a system which is contributing to the strengthening of not only governance but also mature system of accountability, where the people are working on this principle. And the accountable, transparent system of governance lays emphasis on the 5 E's, and these 5 E's in fact are economy, number 1, efficiency, 2, effectiveness, 3, ethics, 4, and equity, 5. Meaning thereby that any system of accountable and good governance will have to be effective, ethical, efficient, equitable, inclusive, and also economical. That is, the maximization of the resource use, achieving the best possible results with the minimum possible resources. So this is what it means, and an accountable system also will, and transparent system will also focus on combating corruption. In several other definitions given by the World Bank and later by the Asian Development Bank and others, some of the other features of governance in fact refer to a number of other characteristics of good governance also. One is the respect for rule of law and human rights, meaning thereby that governance which can be called as accountable will have to function in accordance with rules, regulations and laws, meaning thereby that there should be minimum kind of scope for the exercise of bureaucratic discretion, because the discretionary scopes for the exercise of power are likely to give rise to the misuse or misappropriation of power for maybe personal gains rather than for the collective good. And if we have to work for the collective good, then the answer of course is rule of law and the adherence, the respect for the rules and regulations. In other words, it also means that rules and regulations, instead of personal whims or fancies, have to be the norm of conduct on the part of the administrative and political actors of the system, and also the other stakeholders in the system of governance. Then the other feature of good governance has been mentioned, as I said earlier also, participation and transparency. Now it has been almost accepted by all that people's participation is not only responsive to their aspirations, it is not only responsive to their expectations in terms of decisions, their enforcements and the articulation of their interests, but people's participation in the governance also ensures accountability. People's participation in governance also ensures transparency. And as we know that the closed system where people do not have any entry is more likely to be unresponsive, authoritarian, autocratic in nature, and there could be a gap between what people want and what the government supplies, meaning there is not a demand based governance, it is a supply based governance. The participation of the people in governance will ensure demand based governance also, apart from the supplies of the goods and services. At the same time, responsiveness also has been treated as one of the basic features of the system of governance. In fact, responsiveness is one of the ingredients, particularly to ensure that people are really treated as sovereigns, and particularly in a true healthy democratic society, it goes without saying that the source of authority for the representatives and also the administrators remains the people. The sovereignty lies with the people, which is of course exercised on their behalf by their representatives and also the administrators, right? And if that is so, that people are sovereign, then the authority must be exercised in a manner which really upholds that sovereignty, meaning that the administration functions not only in an accountable manner, not only in a responsible manner, but we need to have a responsive administration. Responsive administration should respond to the growing kind of complaints, pains, grievances of the people whom they represent. In fact, this responsiveness also can be strengthened through the system of transparency. More transparent government, more transparent governance means more responsive governance, more empathetic governance. Responsiveness also implies empathy. The government must be more empathetic with the people. They must appreciate the problems. They must treat them not as burden. They must treat them not as merely some kind of an intruder over their authority, or they must not be treated as intruder from outside disturbing their empire, but they must be treated as the natural claimants on their time, natural claimants on the kind of the power they have. And if that is to be done, then of course it means that the administration has to be more responsive. Now, for ensuring responsiveness, you must also put in place the systems of grievance redressal, and responsiveness also implies that there should be a system where people know as to what kind of services they are supposed to get. That is, the entitlement of the people must be known to them. The ways of delivery of those entitlements must be known to them. And in a way, what I am trying to say is that there must be a system by which a responsive administration can tell the people that these are the available services. So they must ensure accessibility to the services, they must tell the availability of the services, they must tell the quality of services, and by doing so they will be providing a people-friendly governance. To me, responsive governance is more or less the system of people-friendly, people-oriented, and people-empathetic kind of a system of governance. Another point which I would like to clarify as a matter of conceptual ingredient of good governance is that this system also emphasizes on gender equality and inclusion. Now, during the last almost 3-4 decades, we are observing, we are witnessing the growing focus on the rights of different sections, and especially the rights of women and other weaker sections like children, like senior citizens, like the Dalits, and so on and so forth. Now, women do constitute a very significant part of the population of the world, and therefore the discriminations, the denials, the deprivations which the women suffer in various parts of the globe, and especially the developing world, need to be given a due place insofar as policies, programs, administration, or the bureaucratic forums are concerned. Therefore, a good governance system cannot afford to be indifferent to the cause of gender justice or gender equality. At the same time, I have also said that inclusiveness is another very significant part of good governance. What do we really mean by inclusion? In other words, we are saying that inclusion has emanated from the prevailing earlier system of exclusion, or where the approach of governance was more elitist in nature, and the claims of the poorer sections were almost ignored. So therefore,
sorry to interrupt, we have a question from interstate question. Good afternoon, please ask your question.
Hello, sir. My question is that how ethics plays essential role in good governance.
Pardon? Please ask.
Well, I want to know how ethics plays an integral role
Okay.
in good governance.
Okay, her question is how an ethics can play integral role in good governance.
you see, ethics is a term again which has both individual as well as collective connotations. And if I become more responsive, if I become more corruption free, and if I am more empathetic to the people, then at that level I am performing my duties. Performance of duties in accordance with the rules or regulations, performance of my duties in a sympathetic, empathetic manner as an individual in administration will definitely contribute to the collective outcome of the delivery of the goods and services. Therefore, individual can play a very significant role by observing certain codes of conduct, because what is an administration? Administration is a collective body of the people who are concerned with the taking of decisions and delivery of the goods and services. So therefore, it is the individual at the core of any kind of the activity in administration. So therefore, it goes without saying that individual can play, but individual also can vitiate the atmosphere also. While the individual does not respond to the complaints, to the grievances of the people who are visiting him, where the individual is treating the person coming to his office as merely a burden on him and on his time.
Okay, now you continue discussion on inclusion. Inclusive.
And all right, now coming back to the issue of inclusion, I was saying that inclusion has emerged out of the prevalence of exclusionary policies, programs, projects, plans, meaning the development and development administration was more or less elite oriented, and the deprived sections, the weaker sections were kept outside the reach of the development. So therefore, it was realized that no development could be really fruitful to the entire society if it ignores a large part of its population. Hence, the focus was on the gender equality, gender justice, and also the participation and the increasing of the reach of the poorer sections to the development benefits. So this inclusion had two kind of dimensional issue and two-dimensional kind of a strategy. One, that while the framers of the policy, while the framers of the plans and projects must respond to and must take into account the development needs and aspirations of the weaker sections, on the other side it implied that the weaker sections must be given some kind of the participation in decision making, and it also implied the empowerment of the poorer sections of the people. In fact, if you look at the kind of reforms that are taking place in decentralization, in democratization, in the local government reforms, they all indicate to the fact that the focus is now on inclusive development, inclusive governance, inclusive growth. So we can say that good governance is a system which places premium on people's participation in governance and administration. It also means that this is a system which is, as I have already discussed this, a system which is corruption free and which in fact treats all people equally without any kind of a discrimination. In other words, let me further emphasize that a corruption free government is one where there is hardly any place for nepotism, for favoritism, or for decisions based on the considerations of personal gains. Now, at the same time, third question that comes up with regard to the system of good governance or concept of good governance is, as I said in the beginning, that good governance is now becoming more broad-based concept, including not only the governmental institutions like executive, legislature and judiciary, but it also includes Auditor General, Election Commission, it also includes civil services, it includes civil society, it includes media, it includes political parties. Now, what am I trying to convey when I say that these institutions are the pillars of good governance, that these institutions are the instruments of good governance? Well, so far as the governmental institutions are concerned, these are the major agencies, authoritative agencies, legitimate agencies defined.
We have another call from Haryana. So, good afternoon, friend. Please ask your question.
Sir, I asked why the government don't take over the Congress.
Government take umbrage.
Yes, government have a rule on our country because all parties are corrupted.
Okay, his question regard to corruption and umbrage, why they do this. So corruption is a problem, but we can't.
You see, let us not be some kind of a passivist, but it is a fact that the institutional corruption, of course, is a matter of concern, and how to eradicate that corruption from different institutions, whether it is political parties or it is any other institutions like even judiciary or any other institution. The problem is that we have tried to institute several agencies, institutions which are anti-corruption institutions. Both in India and also abroad, we find several measures that have been taken to eradicate corruption. Unfortunately, the institutions have not been able to function effectively. I agree with you, and therefore there is a need to strengthen these processes, but that does not mean that we must condemn kind of every institution. Corruption needs to be addressed through strengthening of the machinery, strengthening of the institutions.
At two levels, one at will level, political will, or the other at the institutional level.
It has to be tackled at three levels.
Okay.
One is that people will have to be very, very participant. They will have to perform the citizenship role. civil society will have to play a very active role as a watchdog, as a vigilant machine. And if the civil society acts as a vigilant machine, then I am sure that the corrupt people as well as corrupt institutions will definitely be put under some kind of a check. The other system where you can say that they can play a role in checking corruption are the anti-corruption institutions.
Okay.
They will have to be given more autonomy, they will have to be given more power, and at the same time those institutions also shall have to be defended against any kind of the authoritarian possibilities of authoritarian exercise of power.
Right.
So, and third is that we will have to cleanse politics, the keeping away of the criminals from politics.
That efforts are already being made. So
Yes, so
we
that,
should be happy in regards to
yes, like for example, the recent Supreme Court judgment in India
that. And
also
even
is
political parties are taking effort,
huh.
measures, measures to check and
Yes, so we will have to have that kind of response at political level, at the level of the society, at the level of the institutions.
okay. Now we continue with the.
Now, I was saying that there are several institutions, which are pillars of good governance, and therefore executive, legislature and judiciary will have to perform their assigned role in a more effective manner. Unfortunately, we find that sometimes there are certain lapses or weaknesses. For example, we have seen in the working of the parliament that the number of sittings of the parliament have come down. The productivity of parliament also has declined. The effectivity of parliament as a watchdog institution also is on decline. So therefore, we will have to evolve certain methods of restoring the effectivity of the state institutions like executive, legislature, judiciary, and the systems of audit. The financial accountability, financial transparency also play a very important role in good governance. If the finances are not being properly used and there is no control over the use of the resources in a more transparent manner, there is likelihood of the misappropriation of funds. So therefore, to bring efficiency to the finance use and also to ensure that there is hardly a place for the misappropriation of funds, the Auditor General has to be given a greater power, a greater respect, a greater recognition in the system, because it has to function both as a watchdog of the procedures, and it has also to work as a watchdog of the efficiency of policies and the programs. I have also said that election commission is another pillar of governance and democracy. The quality of democracy and the extent of democracy is directly linked with the functioning of the election commission and its role in the conduct of the free and fair elections. If the elections are free and fair and the representatives are of course reflecting the will of the people, then the sovereignty of the people can be reflected in good governance. Media is the fourth pillar of democracy and governance, and I can say that media in fact is not merely concerned with exposing.
Okay. We have another caller from Jaipur. Good afternoon. Please ask your question.
Sir, I have a question that Supreme Court take action against corrupt politicians and criminalization in politics. The government should have a सॉरी अगर मैं हिंदी में कहूँ तो अगर सरकार चाहे तो ऐसे फैसले खुद नहीं ले सकती थी जहाँ सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने ये ट्रांसपेरेंसी और राजनीतिक अपराधीकरण को रोकने के लिए ये सारा जो एक्शन लिया है, तो इसमें तो ट्रांसपेरेंसी गवर्नमेंट खुद नहीं ले सकती थी।
इनका प्रश्न है कि जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने जजमेंट दिया, क्या खुद से पॉलिटिशियन नहीं कर सकते हैं सेल्फ रेगुलेशन की बात? तो निश्चित तौर पे कुछ काम तो हो रहे हैं, कुछ मेजर्स लिए जा रहे हैं, कुछ में जहां उनका हस्तक्षेप जरूरी है या जब एक्सेस हो तब ले रहे हैं। आपका क्या कहना है?
देखिए, अच्छा तो यही होगा कि जो काम पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज खुद करें और एक सेल्फ रेगुलेटरी मैकेनिज्म वो इवॉल्व करें, लेकिन जो कंपल्शंस पॉलिटिक्स के और फ्रेगमेंटेड पॉलिटिक्स के ख़ास तौर पर हैं, उन कंपल्शंस में आपने देखा कि पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज़ किस तरीके से अपना एक रिएक्शन इसमें दे रही हैं। लेकिन एट द सेम टाइम I would come, in fact I have already included political parties as one of the institutions responsible for good governance, and I think that political parties can play the role both ways. They can also usher in the system of bad governance, and they can also usher in the system of good governance as well. And so far as this reforms, electoral reforms are concerned, in fact it is desirable that political parties reform their inner system of functioning and working. They themselves observe democracy and democratic methods of functioning, and they also impose certain restrictions by not giving tickets to the criminals. But you know, as you might have seen, that there are certain valid objections on the part of the political parties also. Let us not try to just evade the genuine concerns which the political parties are raising, particularly when we know that the power can be misused by the ruling party against the rivals. Now, if suppose a person is under police custody at the time of filing nominations, of course it will have the problems if they are not allowed to contest the elections, particularly if a false case has been framed. So therefore we will have to go into details of and must come out with an answer which is free from flaws and takes care of cleansing politics and keeping the criminals out of the electoral fray. Right. Now, I was saying that Election Commission is one of the agencies which can ensure a true representative democracy, and the true representative democracy will definitely bring in a true substantive democracy as well. We will not have merely the electoral democracy. We will not be confined only to voting and electing governments, but we will also be establishing a government which listens to the development requirements of all sections of the society, and especially those who are unable to develop themselves. I said that media, in fact I was saying that media must not be merely concerned with exposing or criticizing the government. Rather, I would say that media should play the role of a collaborative critic, where the information relating to several development policies or programs or the activities, they must be communicated to the people rather than merely sensationalizing the issues. The media must focus on the issues of governance more, and particularly keeping the citizen, keeping the weaker sections in mind. They must propagate the schemes and the information relating to those schemes, the methods by which the people can avail the benefits made under the schemes of the government. I had already, to answer to a question on political parties, have said that political parties in fact are not only creating the alternatives for the choices before the electorate of the people, they are providing some kind of a mechanism for creating public opinion, for asserting public opinion, and also to act as a corrective machine if the government at any point of time seems to go astray on the issues of development and justice to the people. Now, after having discussed this broad concept of governance, now the second concept that we had talked about in the beginning was transparency. What is transparency? What do we really mean? We use it almost every time, that transparency is the key to good governance, that transparency is the key to responsive governance. So what is transparency? And in very simple terms, transparency is a system which implies open decision making. And when we say that it is concerned with open decision making, and it is concerned with a very transparent enforcement of the decisions and the law, then we can say that it signifies transparent governance. Now, at the same time, when we are saying it is signifying transparency in governance, it means that whatever is being done should not be covered under the secrecy wherever it is not required. In other words, transparent governance or transparency in governance implies more and more dissemination of information to the people. People must be provided with access to information, easy access, open access, and cost-effective access to information, rather of free information. There should be a free flow of information to the citizenry, and this free flow of information regarding making and implementation of the decisions of the government will further strengthen the system of accountability and governance in the country. The management of the affairs of the country will become more accountable if it is done in a transparent manner, meaning thereby that we must make use of the modern technology to communicate with the people, to converse with the people, to dialogue with the people, and also not ever play any kind of obstructive role if any person comes to us with a demand for information, until unless it is not in the interest of the nation to disclose that information. Right? And so far as accountability is concerned, we can say that this is another area where accountability has gained importance in the policy and development discourse in the last 2 decades. In fact, the World Development Report of 2001 and the World Development Report of 2004, particularly on
We'll
the
discuss these details in tomorrow.
making services for the poor, has emphasized on the importance of accountability in governance.
So, well friends, we will talk in detail this report in tomorrow lecture, and also the operational part of these terms like governance, accountability and transparency. So, with this word we conclude the lecture. I thank all of you for watching the lecture, and on your behalf I thank Dr. Rajveer Sharma for giving such an insightful lecture. Thank you very much.